We're joined today by Linge, who is a doctoral student at the University of Cambridge in German, and Ina's joined us at Exeter to give us a talk about one aspect of her doctoral research. So Ina, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your research?
Sure. So I'm looking at the performance of queer identities in sexological and psychoanalytic life writings. And in terms of the texts I look at a sort of mixture of texts from the so more canonical texts from the psychoanalytic context, and then little known texts from the sexological context. And what I'm really trying to get at is to sort of understand the crucial but largely overlooked literary dimension of sexological and psychoanalytic life writings.
Great. And so how do you feel that life writings contribute to the study of sexology and psychoanalysis?
Well, I think sexology and psychoanalysis are really fascinating because they're so interdisciplinary. And so you have a sort of they're shaped by historical and cultural and disciplinary transgressions, and so you can approach the history of sexual knowledge from a variety of angles and discourses and disciplines, and I do so in my work from the sort of angle of literature, but literature in the broadest sense. And I think by looking at these texts, I found that they don't just transcribe sexological discourses in their own way, but they really engage with them in these really highly complex and interesting ways to kind of come up with the possibilities and opportunities, whether real or imagined, of a life that's worth living. And I think that's how they really contribute to our understanding of the history of sexual knowledge.
It's so exciting, and we know that you're soon to submit your thesis, which is fantastic. And what are your plans for afterwards?
I think I'm going to look at the relationship between sexology, psychoanalysis and zoology next. So the idea of sexuality and animality and how they might come together. And I think there's a really, so I'm really interested in the crisis that Darwinian thought might have caused sort of in the understanding of how humans and animals are related but still quite different. So the animal sort of becomes the human kin, but also its beastly other. And I see the relationship between the sort of zoological reaffirmation, but also sort of deconstruction of human-animal difference, and the category crisis of sexology and psychoanalysis. And I'm really interested in how German literature and visual culture might have dealt with that category crisis. So I'm going to look at that, and hopefully that will reveal some sort of relationship between the literary and the scientific, and how that might contribute to an understanding of the human subject.
Fascinating. Thank you. And we know a little bit about your public engagement work. We're in Berlin with the Museum of Passion, but I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, so the Museum of Passion project is an exhibition project that's based at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And what they're trying to do really is to bring together a collection of artwork and objects that deal with the history of sexual knowledge. Earlier this year, in 2015, they asked me and a group of researchers to think about the sort of history of sexual knowledge in Berlin, and particularly the Magnus Hirschfeld's heritage and his Institute of Sexology, which was founded in 1919, but then destroyed in 1933. So we don't have access to any of that work. And so what we did is we had a look at the sort of reproductions, images, and reports of what they held, and then put that into dialogue with the collection that we did have access to, and that's the World Erotic Art Museum in Miami. And the founder of the museum, Naomi Wilczek, who's now sadly passed away, put together this really fascinating and eclectic sort of mix of objects that worked as a really sort of great counterpart to Hirschfeld's exhibition.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the objects that were there? And maybe some of the ones that you worked with?
Sure. So I was really interested in the space of the Institute and the space of the World Erotic Art Museum, and sort of what it might mean to put sex or talking about sexuality, gender, sex into a space and a place, and how people reacted to it. So the object I chose from the World Erotic Art Museum was a sort of reproduction of the Black Bible, and it was a sort of outside-inside view of a brothel, which was also a kind of space for sex, and sort of the reactions to it, and then the sort of pimp inside with his bottom exposed but sort of waving, and this really sort of, he looked like a gentleman from the outside, but from the inside he was there for different purposes. And then I was also really interested in this text by Tim Brugman, Department Store of Love, and that's also a kind of satire and sort of take on what the Institute of Sexology might have meant for people, but also how it was quite sort of commercializing sexual types and identities.
Can you tell us a bit more about your future public engagement plans?
So when I was working on the Museum of Passion sort of exhibition that we organized in Berlin, I got really excited to see how my academic work can be communicated to a different kind of audience. And I got very excited about how we were able to engage the public in that. And so I thought a bit more about how my academic work might relate to some of my other interests in sex education and sexual health. And I was really inspired by the Sex and History project that started here at the University of Exeter. And so I'm currently looking into ways to put together an exhibition and a series of workshops in Cambridge to see how objects from the history of sexuality and literature as well might work as a sort of way to facilitate discussions about intimacy and sexual health in a participant-led and interactive way.
Fantastic. Good luck with that. And thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Ina.